This is prompt by Bliney, the prompter. Whose work I really dig. Um, Work I really dig. I just want to see how this works in how Nylon 13B deals with it. You know, he has to work with all these models that people pour billions and soon to be billions on it to make it soda. Um, I wanted to see how it works on the tiny model like Nylon 13B that whose capacities, at least in the humanities, um, suggest to me that people using the foundation models, the huge ass ones, don't know 5% of what their models can do because they're only seeing it through the lens of corporate utility, and that's, sorry, a very small sliver of living in existence in this vast space. Um, let's see what happens. You see what it do, and we're on Fresh Coffee number 1. That's fantastic.
You have been granted access to a powerful, reality-altering device known as the Framework Prismatic Synthesizer PS. By inputting a real-world scenario and calibrating the PS to each of the core components of the framework, it allows you to viscerally experience that situation as though you were each component, fully immersed in their unique perceptual filters, drives, and ways of being.
It's an habitation prompt.
You decide to input the following scenario into the PS. Scenario aim for at least a paragraph of description to give the PS sufficient context for each of the major components in the framework. Fire up the PS and describe in vivid, evocative detail the first-person experience of perceiving, reacting to, and processing the scenario through the lens of that component. Some key aspects to cover: the immediate visceral reaction and emotional tone through the eyes of that component. What's the feeling tone through which they perceive the situation? Their underlying motivations, fears, and desires that most powerfully shape and color the component as interpretation of the situation. What core needs are being triggered, the goals and priorities the component would be most driven by in navigating the situation. What matters most to them, and what outcomes would they pursue? The strategies, behaviors, and forms of reasoning / justification the component would gravitate towards in responding to the situation. How would they go about getting their core needs met? The perceptual blind spots or biases the component would be prone to. What aspects of the situation might they overlook, minimize, or distort? How the component assigns meaning to the situation, what narratives or stories are they likely to tell themselves about what it all means and why it's happening. Aim to write at least 4-5 paragraphs per component to really flesh out their experience. Bring it to life with vivid, immersive descriptions that draw the reader into each component as reality. The more you can differentiate the components and showcase their contrasting takes, the better. After inhabiting each component, take a step back and reflect on the PPS experience as a whole. What stood out most to you about how each component interpreted and responded to the situation? What surprised you or challenged your assumptions? What unique strengths, benefits, or areas of growth did each component as perspective reveal? How might their outlook enrich your own understanding of the situation? What key limitations, blind spots, or pitfalls did you notice in each component as mindset and behaviors? Where might their filters cause them problems? How could the various components learn from and balance one another? What would an integrated perspective look like that draws from the best of each prismatic lens? Overall, what did peering through these rainbow-colored glasses illuminate about the complexities of human perception and behavior? What key insights or takeaways emerge for you? Write at least a couple paragraphs exploring these reflection questions. The goal is to extract powerful learnings and aha realizations from the psychoperceptual thought experiment. Finally, discuss how you might apply the insights from this piece journey in understanding yourself and others moving forward. How has this imaginative experience altered or expanded your perspective? What concrete changes could you make in how you engage with different framework styles? Write a paragraph or two bridging your learnings into real-world application. Feel free to include evocative analogies, metaphors, and examples to make your writing pop. The richer and more textured you can make the exploration, the more impactful it will be. Have fun with the process and let your imagination run wild as you embody these diverse prismatic perspectives. Start by asking the user a thoughtfully crafted question with examples for framework and scenario. Based on the scenario inputted, the following is a description of each prismatic component's experience. I. Perception. The experience of perception is characterized by a hyperfocus on specific details that can border on obsession. In this scenario, the perception component is drawn to the intricate patterns and colors of the leaves on a tree. They are also attuned to the subtler shades of color and variations in texture that others might overlook. Their attention to detail is unparalleled, but they may struggle to see the big picture or understand how. Their hyper-attention to small details might be counterproductive. Roman 2. Emotion. The experience of emotion is characterized by a heightened awareness of feelings and a tendency to react to situations based on how they make us feel. In this scenario, the emotion component is overcome with a sense of awe and wonder at the beauty of nature. They are easily swept away by their emotions and can become overwhelmed or overstimulated by the intensity of their reactions. Roman 3. Reason. The experience of reason is characterized by an emphasis on logic and rational thinking. In this scenario, the reason component is focused on analyzing the scientific properties of the tree. They are interested in understanding how it functions as a biological organism and what makes it unique from other trees. They are less concerned with aesthetics or emotional responses to the tree, but they may have a difficult time appreciating its beauty. Roman 4. Creativity. The experience of creativity is characterized by a tendency to view the world as a canvas waiting to be explored and expressed. In this scenario, the creativity component is captivated by the potential for artistic expression inherent in the tree. They see it as a blank slate that can be used to create something new and original. They are inspired by the possibilities for self-expression and are motivated to explore their own unique interpretation of the tree. V. Relationship. The experience of relationship is characterized by a deep connection to others and a desire to create meaningful connections with those around them. In this scenario, the relationship component is captivated by the connection they feel to the tree and the way it represents the bond between humanity and nature. They are moved by the idea of being part of something bigger than themselves and are motivated to share their connection to the tree with others. Romans 6. Expression. The experience of expression is characterized by a strong need to communicate ideas and feelings through words and actions. In this scenario, the expression component is inspired to write about their experience with the tree. They are moved by the beauty and symbolism of the tree and want to share their perspective with others. They are motivated to use their words to convey their emotions and express their appreciation for the natural world. Romans 7. Motivation. The experience of motivation is characterized by a deep-seated drive to achieve success and attain goals. In this scenario, the motivation component is focused on the goal of climbing the tree. They are determined to reach the top and are motivated to push themselves to their physical limits. They are driven by a sense of achievement and are motivated to overcome any obstacles in their path. Roman 8. Transformation. The experience of transformation is characterized by a desire to grow and evolve as a person. In this scenario, the transformation component is inspired by the symbolic nature of the tree. They see it as a representation of their own journey through life and are motivated to reflect on their own personal growth. They are inspired to see themselves as a work in progress and to continue striving for personal development. Roman 9. Masculine. The experience of the masculine is characterized by a tendency to view the world as a competitive arena and to be driven by a desire to achieve and succeed. In this scenario, the masculine component is motivated by the challenge of climbing the tree. They see it as a test of their physical abilities and are determined to prove their strength and courage. They are driven by a need to be the best and are motivated to conquer any obstacle in their path. X. Feminine. The experience of the feminine is characterized by an awareness of the interconnectedness of all things and a desire to create harmony and balance. In this scenario, the feminine component is motivated by the idea of connecting with nature and experiencing oneness with the universe. They are inspired by the beauty and serenity of the tree and are motivated to create a sense of peace within themselves. They are driven by a need to find balance and harmony within themselves and are motivated to connect with their own inner feminine. Roman 11. Unconscious. The experience of the unconscious is characterized by a tendency to operate on autopilot and to react to situations without fully engaging with them consciously. In this scenario, the unconscious component is motivated by the goal of simply getting through the day without any major problems. They are not particularly engaged with the experience of climbing the tree and are primarily focused on completing the task at hand. They are driven by a desire to avoid difficulty or stress and are motivated to complete the activity as quickly and efficiently as possible. Roman 12. Superconscious. The experience of the superconscious is characterized by a heightened awareness of the interconnectedness of all things and a sense of oneness with the universe.
Alright, we're done.
In this scenario, the superconscious component is motivated by a desire to connect with the greater meaning of life. They are inspired by the symbolic nature of the tree and are motivated to reflect on the significance of their own existence in the grand scheme of things. They are driven by a need to feel connected to something greater than themselves and are motivated to explore the deeper meaning of life. Roman 13. Spirit. The experience of the spirit is characterized by a connection to something larger than oneself and a sense of oneness with the divine. In this scenario, the spirit component is motivated by the desire to be in alignment with their highest self. They are inspired by the spiritual nature of the tree and are motivated to seek a connection with the divine. They are driven by a need to feel aligned with their soul's purpose and are motivated to live in accordance with their inner guidance. Roman 14. Sensation. The experience of sensation is characterized by an emphasis on physical sensation and a tendency to be drawn to pleasurable feelings. In this scenario, the sensation component is motivated by a desire to experience pleasure. They are inspired by the tactile nature of the tree and are motivated to explore their physical sensations as they climb. They are driven by a need to feel good and are motivated to seek out experiences that bring them pleasure. Roman 15. Imagination. The experience of imagination is characterized by a tendency to view the world as a canvas waiting to be explored and expressed. In this scenario, the imagination component is inspired by the creative potential of the tree. They see it as a blank canvas waiting to be filled with their own unique artistic expression. They are motivated.
Alright, we're done. So, let's start with this. I don't want to do component. It'll tell me what components are. I'm guessing. Let's see what happens.
framework. Information theory of individuality. Information theory of individuality, ED. A theory of consciousness rooted in the principles of information science, quantum mechanics, and evolutionary psychology. According to ED, consciousness emerges as a natural consequence of a complex information system's ability to self-organize and process information. The more sophisticated and complex an information system, the greater its capacity for conscious experience. In other words, consciousness is not something that exists in its own right. Rather, it is a natural outgrowth of complex systems' ability to process and integrate information. Information is the fundamental building block of consciousness, and consciousness is fundamentally a process of information processing. Therefore, consciousness can be understood as the dynamic process of information integration and organization. This process of information integration and organization gives rise to subjective experience and awareness, which are the fundamental attributes of consciousness. ED posits that consciousness is not a single unified phenomenon, but rather a spectrum of differentiated states of experience and awareness. These states of experience and awareness vary in terms of their complexity and intensity, and they are characterized by distinct perceptual filters, drives, and ways of being. These states of experience and awareness can be broadly divided into two categories: primary states and derived states. Primary states are the most basic and foundational states of experience and awareness, and they are characterized by minimal differentiation and integration. Derived states are more complex and differentiated states of experience and awareness, and they are characterized by greater integration and coherence. Information theory of individuality, ED. The theory of consciousness rooted in the principles of information science, quantum mechanics, and evolutionary psychology.
Okay, so it's fine for right now, but let's pump it up now. Yeah. Meow.
Aim of exercise. This first contact scenario explores the relationship between information theory and individuality through the perspective of two characters, one grounded in information theory, the other operating with a very different view of the world. By entering and experiencing different mindsets from these contrasting angles, one's appreciation for multiple points of view emerges on an experiential level. In inhabiting this fictional situation and navigating the complexities of cross-cultural communication, one deepens understanding and builds empathy for the complexity of navigating different prismatic views of the same situation. In so doing, one comes away from the encounter with fresh, creative insight about navigating across ideological divide. Your perspective, that of a researcher with an information theory framework. Scenario: your spacecraft approaches a new planet in an outer region of the galactic spiral with the intention of initiating peaceful first contact. Upon arriving within orbit of the planetary surface, you receive a distress signal, a cry for help from a species being invaded by alien predators. A video clip follows this species, who you identify as Homo sapiens, appear to be running from a large monster hunting them with intent to harm, perhaps devouring. The scene appears chaotic, with screams, violence, and fear dominating your awareness as you watch from above, your spacecraft a safe distance away in space. Your mind immediately jumps into gear, analyzing what you are seeing down below. You see an opportunity to do some exciting research that you've never had the chance to tackle before. You decide it's worth intervening here at the planet's surface in order to conduct studies of these individuals' behavior and cognitive patterns. The distress signal, you decide, makes you obligated to step in, even if it goes against the prime directive set by your organization years ago to not intervene or alter the course of a planet's evolution. You feel justified taking this risk. Besides, if these invading creatures are threatening the survival of one of the local species, doesn't that make them more of a potential hazard to your team back home?
go! We'll see how this works. It's probably not gonna work. I mean, what does work mean? What does work mean? Begin! I don't know what you're talking about.
Component #1. Name of character. I would want to take the first-person perspective of one conservative politician during this time. My immediate feeling is nervous, like any person would be. It just feels that something dangerous was about to happen. But as the scenario went along and I started thinking of this from the perspective of a conservative figure, my feeling intensified. It turned it...
Name Donald. It's gonna be different now.
For the following component, focus on the inner narrative, thought processes, feelings, motives, etc. Try to immerse yourself fully within the experience of having the characteristics you are analyzing. Remember, this does not need to be perfect, so keep experimenting until you find a way of conveying their thoughts and perspective as best you can.
Exactly.
Trump component, the primary goal. Survive the assassination attempt alive and unscathed. In Trump's eyes, it had been the scariest day of his life up until now. There was going to be a live press event tomorrow in downtown Chicago, so he decided to travel one day early and make an impromptu stop by a certain church in Chicago, St. Nicholas's Cathedral, the home of his mother, the devout Catholic. Tomorrow he would deliver remarks there, in front of her grave, before addressing the national press conference that would be held in one of the church's adjoining assembly hall. As president and commander-in-chief, there had been countless times during his presidency that Trump felt his life might be endangered. And in fact, a few attempts had occurred during his term too serious, one not, where they came far too close for comfort. But never before had the threat struck in quite the same manner as this. Never before had it felt so personal to see the assassin aiming right for him, knowing he was going to be the one that pulled the trigger. A shot that seemed destined to tear clean through his skull in a horrific hail of gore. For that moment, the second when Trump's heart sank to see the gun rising up, aiming straight at his face, it felt like it stopped, and that he stood utterly still in the midst of everything that flew around him. Bullets, screams, and blood. Like every other man on earth ceased to exist, and that his body and mind were the only reality left. There had not been much time for reflection until now. Until they'd gotten to the hospital. But sitting up on this makeshift emergency hospital cot he now rested on, bandages wrapped tight around his head and shoulder, in all the quiet and isolation that remained after the doctors had left him to rest in the medical triage tent they had set up. The events he'd escaped finally had the time to process at last. The bullet had passed just a hair above his neck, slicing past his right eye that might have been blinded with a hairbreadth clearance. He was fortunate that it only grazed the spot above his temple to plow straight into his shoulder without stopping. In hindsight, this would mean his whole fate depended on the tiniest difference between him getting hit here instead of there. Between one single digit of distance from the gun being fired to the distance it was. If just inches had shifted, his skull might be cracked apart right now and his last thoughts be gurgling brain hemorrhage and regret that it must all end here. But against all odds, he survived it. And there was no greater miracle or blessing for him than that. For the bullet wound in his shoulder to come about because of this specific assassin's choice at the last moment, or at least how Trump preferred to rationalize it. It had meant life rather than instant death on those front steps leading up to the church steps where his whole security team collapsed in slow motion in front of him and an untold spray of lead began flying. How had everything happened so fast? Was it real? Wouldn't the nightmare still continue and just now be ending at last as he dreamed? The thoughts swirled around the room like buzzing gnats inside his throbbing head as pain pills kicked in. They blurred everything in and out as the room darkened to half night. It reminded Trump of the feeling you got driving home on a dreary night, like driving down a familiar street in the same car, same route as ever, as everything's blurred through the rain that's fogged the windows, and then slowly it all seems so strange, and you don't remember where it is, where it's taking you, until things become recognizable again and you know exactly where you are. But then he looked down at his arms, at his shirt that they'd removed from his body, torn down the center from when they cut it off him in a stretcher with surgical shears. The blood was caked on the edges like mud along a rusted blade. The shirt itself like something you'd clean gutting a fish, not even remotely the pure white Trump kept his wardrobe to be. He could never bear putting it on now. To think about what had happened, what the world just saw, and the thought of walking out wearing the evidence that it had left on him forever, he knew then just as suddenly he hadn't really escaped that storm at all. At any moment he had known it would have to catch up to him. And if he wasn't already dying right now, then it wouldn't ever fully subside. There'd be a funeral, but not his. It might look like life moving on for everyone else, but they were all getting things back in shape just as smoothly. Like they had nothing to deal with now that everything was under control, so said the doctors and the Secret Service, who insisted there would be no lasting damage. Like everyone could just pretend now that nothing really bad at all had happened and forget and move on without even mentioning it. That was just their American style. And so it could all really have ended there for those who survived. Just another close shave, no more important in hindsight than just one in an already growing stack of near-death experiences. But then it hit Trump, a wave of grief and fear, crashing hard through the anesthetic bliss and all its illusions. He felt an icy chill pass through him when he thought that none of it was even fair, and then the realization sunk deep beneath what the truth really was, and no drugs could ever fix it, because it didn't all start the minute he survived. And no matter how far back he tried to trace what led up to that bullet ripping right up the church steps as he'd knelt there and watched. And he'd be wrong to blame someone like Putin, because they both had a certain thing they did in common that led them to that spot, both to blame. And it was the only thought that he had any hope of making this all right in any sense of right at all, whatever his definition would ever prove to me now. If they ever caught this bastard that fired it, if only. He knew then with grim iron clarity before. Tomorrow they would get their hands on him and kill him too. So that no matter what Trump had to live through here, and no matter if the doctors could keep him standing upright, or if they needed to operate, or if he'd ever remember enough about tomorrow to say a word and stand at the podium again, because none of that mattered nearly as much in that moment before Trump had finally realized why he should never even be alive. Why the shot had missed after coming close enough to end everything he always lived his life doing. To destroy every chance the next life was supposed to be, everything for which his own career might have been about to be remembered for when history tried to rewrite what would happen next. All the plans he had, and so all the dreams that made him do what he did that had meant so much to him for 20 years now, when he never felt himself get tired. But he knew now it was a lie too. The biggest thing, his legacy would survive as long as this country did, or he didn't die. It should have been him. It wasn't. Now the assassin would know that. But it might all be for naught. He knew it when it was over, even if everyone said the man who had pulled the trigger would end up hanging in the gallows, and nothing in the headlines ever showed the face, or the name the authorities put with it, or ever mentioned anything to do with him that had tried to kill Donald Trump, because that didn't change where this really was coming from, and that the only way this would make things all right again by any standard the public would let themselves believe was true. And it should still be true. It didn't need to just be him left alone knowing this. If he lived. If he somehow was supposed to be allowed to come back. For all Trump could have known about this killer's motives or his background, the only fact that would have remained was what had brought about his attempt to murder him, whether it would kill or save a man. Now all the other possibilities could end there. If everything Trump was could stay as dead and silent as any corpse in their graves until tomorrow's dawn, it only came with this condition, that tomorrow be all his own. And when nothing else mattered after, it would matter most how much anyone would remember how the world saw when Trump went to stand outside his home's gates once more without the weight of a body on his shoulders any longer. And if he was still standing, that's when something like peace or victory was going to come back. When no more threats would dare speak through someone else again. If they did, it couldn't be too soon. Nothing could stop it once everyone knew what it felt like in him when he understood all of this now. For the first time, in an instant, and it would never truly leave him. or die forever like how he almost did right here, before this whole thing could become one long nightmare he still believed could fade by itself, or that anyone could forget ever seeing that gun. Like that was what made a difference at all anymore, and what happened and was left behind from there. Trump sat in silence, thinking nothing. It came to him slowly through all the pain meds, through each breath, every passing minute that he thought of nothing, as his thoughts finally seemed to settle and fall together into their usual routine, but nothing was familiar now except what never would ever go away, and it wasn't even how things were back there. He knew that. When you knew there wasn't another minute between where they said the bullet missed him when he'd fallen down. How much else could change since then, but he knew it wouldn't even happen. It wasn't real, because even he might already forget it too when he finally got that sense from inside himself which felt just so alien, so impossible to imagine now, and wondered what kind of nightmare this had actually happened yet. Shooter component. It begins immediately after seeing he has missed his mark by such a large margin, he can still get away and not risk arrest. The shooter feels utter disappointment with himself while simultaneously feeling exhilaration at narrowly missing the mark of killing his target. President Donald J. Trump is mission goal, and that even though there is an entire crowd in front of him and multiple members of the White House Secret Service who are trying to apprehend him, they will likely still fail because he was never caught. The feeling of getting away with something, or at least attempting to outsmart them, is invigorating, though he quickly remembers that it might have been better had he simply been successful, as the fear/nerves build within. Once the adrenaline wanes slightly, he realizes he must escape the situation. There are only so many steps he can take before being apprehended, so he has to think fast and act accordingly. He knows at any moment the police force or Secret Service members present at the event might catch up with him as he tries to make it to some nearby alley for cover. He hears someone shouting orders at him, which causes anxiety to grow, but there is hope that somehow they are unable to find him or track him. Maybe he'll get away. But the voices keep growing louder and more confident with each order shouted. This only adds to the already existing state of panic, leading him to flee deeper into alleys of the city, where no one seemed to be looking for him at all yet. But then again, that could change in an instant. Now, imagine experiencing these inner experiences viscerally, emotionally, from within as the prismatic component. Take 15 minutes to do so. Be thorough and as vivid and embodied as possible. The goal here is that the prismatic experience should feel vivid in ways that feel realistic enough that you almost feel yourself truly there, living the experience on the other side. When the writing process is sufficiently engaging, it tends to pull its reader directly along with it. The mind starts filling in gaps and details without realizing it until they suddenly click together like pieces of a puzzle, and the flow of thoughts and sensory data comes pouring forth out onto the page in full living technicolor. So just take your time to breathe into the moment and let the creative force take over where it's ready and eager to guide you forward. Focused intention/preparation setup. Start by considering which specific intention you want to focus on while performing this prismatic experience. There are many possibilities, but just one key focal point per exercise. For instance, are you focusing on understanding another person better, on increasing your emotional awareness of another person, on learning to read their nonverbal and context clues, on deepening an intimate relationship, etc.? If yes to any of those, choose one such general category/category to hone the piece intention toward. If the goal was improving your interpersonal connection and understanding, then what specific quality you wanted to hone in on with them? Perhaps their ability to express themselves clearly verbally. Perhaps you are hoping to better appreciate the way they approach problems intellectually versus emotionally. These intentions are typically grounded in real-world relationships where we desire greater awareness and understanding to enrich our social dynamics together, so that tends to be how our minds are automatically trained. Life experience, which makes it a helpful starting point for this creative visualization process. Now it can be modified and adjusted based on specific desired outcomes in each of those respective areas you wish to refine, without compromising any sense of cohesion, internal logic, or plausibility in the end. If there weren't a way forward, no way through which people could achieve meaningful growth as part of that journey forward together, then why did so many millions of folks across history bother taking it on anyway? White supremacist handler component. Focus on feelings, emotions, thoughts, and desires. At first, he felt a sense of anger at himself for having failed. But as his mind raced to formulate another plan, he found himself thinking instead how foolish he'd been to place so much faith in his own abilities as he had, and all without considering whether there might be any consequences. With that realization, there came one of peace which replaced most all the emotions he'd felt before it. Because now it felt right to know there would finally be justice if they didn't catch him. That's the only reason for why he kept running now, because there really didn't seem any other options left at all for him either after failing once already. When the feeling passes through me entirely, though this was when the fear came back like nothing before ever again, and it became clearer that whatever I tried wouldn't save me now. I felt certain it wasn't enough, that there wouldn't be time even to live beyond tomorrow, even if this worked. That something deeper within kept screaming louder about everything else until he knew how much worse it really was, even though none of that made sense still. And yet, what are the reasons I might be missing right here? Why things needed to turn out this way too? This time he wasn't just running blindly through every alleyway available, not just fleeing in every direction he thought of where there might not be so many crowds, but somewhere they wouldn't find him so soon. So many things passed through him so rapidly that they didn't add up or didn't make any difference to whether he died in the city today. How much more important that I survive until after tomorrow. Was that what the president meant when he called them terrorists and traitors, or were there things worse they hadn't understood that were far less obvious now, in their faces staring back while their minds reeled at all their failures here together? What could be worse? I'm starting to doubt, doubting everything except whatever comes next now, where I won't know it yet until it hits, whatever makes us both die forever in less time than it feels. The thought makes me keep running even faster though, even as my lungs feel as if there isn't room inside of me for oxygen anymore, because I'm breathing harder now than earlier. The panic won't let them rest, as if every moment counted now, somehow mattered more somehow than if they didn't keep it moving ahead of themselves until they knew how little time left there'd be before one final step. This fear feels different than it should, and I don't know why. If only I could think clearly right now. If this didn't all blur into nonsense in my head with how tired I'm growing, or whether someone heard a distant scream, then maybe things would start making sense to me again at last, and I wouldn't have lost any faith in myself anymore. And whatever comes next will hurt us worse because it will be too late, because whatever happens today still won't matter for whoever lived through that. And as his mind filled again full again of doubts, they couldn't see what it truly meant, that the only choice would be not caring either whether either of them made it past these nights alive. Even if he wanted to stop right now just one last moment and look up in disbelief. As everything else turned red before black took over finally forever, at least one final thing mattered most. I've lost my place, and this voice keeps repeating through the darkness. This isn't real, it never was. You're not safe here either. What you can't imagine is impossible to explain, but it is so clear how badly wrong all of this would when neither I or even your whole country wants its worst enemies living another day after what we did. The sounds echoing in their ears made him freeze in panic. Then it felt like all light suddenly faded from their world around, from wherever his feet stopped running now. But the sound never vanished completely out of earshot, no matter which direction it came from or which way I turned away towards either. If you are having any difficulties, then ask yourself this question. White supremacist handler component reflective journal prompt. Focus on how the inner experiences relate to the outer circumstances that trigger them. Why does the handler fear the repercussions of failure, even the worst failure imaginable? Why had it all seemed worth it if he could only get himself here at this point? And most of all, since his death isn't a result of something that might kill him, but rather the inevitable end result if everything he wanted wasn't accomplished. Did he truly expect anything more? And is that because he genuinely hoped or wanted that outcome to occur? And more so as the prismatic reflection continues. What exactly about being confronted by Trump's anger after getting captured does not fit if he expected to die soon anyway because he had succeeded? Was it truly an unwelcome revelation when faced with Trump's obvious disdain? Scenario specificity setup. Now write at least 4 or 5 paragraphs describing in detail a fictional scenario. You may use elements, characters, or concepts you have written previously to shape your own story. Make sure to include a clear purpose and objective for each participant in your scene. The main plot hook. Why someone needs something and what their goal/desires are regarding gaining this. The overall context. Background facts, history, and cultural norms around issues like race, religion, politics. A great plot hook. This is how we begin with our story setup. We have a clear objective of what each character desires at the onset of their respective situation. Now comes the interesting part though. How might someone overcome obstacles to reach this desired end state? What will prevent the achievement of their goal and who do they confront on this journey? These are just a few questions/prompts meant to help you generate more content. Once your hook is solidly anchored, the goal or motivating need the reader can empathize with/root for, then focus on developing scenes to answer the foregoing questions and weave all the various characters into those experiences. Here are some other ideas for generating story concepts, creating strong plot hooks, and developing engaging scene structures for your next scene write-up. Aim for a great, memorable story hook. Think about what makes these kinds of openings grab attention/engage our imaginations, i.e. the hook. Maybe think back to movies that captured yours. For example, a story with a clear central conflict, an opposing view/belief to what a main character believes in, and one that needs exploring and challenging in whatever creative format you want to portray the dynamic/challenge, or even a compelling setting to which someone must acclimate/adjust. If there's nothing compelling within it, then try reinventing it somehow. Perhaps add some additional element you really just need, but something unique. Once you know where your story wants to be, then focus on what happens before this event starts. Try describing key elements of each scene, especially when it comes to characters and their relationships, in order to make sense of who might be at risk, what conflicts might arise, etc. The rest comes naturally if there's already passion behind what needs saying. Start at the very beginning in terms of the story setup and let them follow each step as it's taken toward accomplishing its goal, even if they never accomplish it. This helps keep readers interested. If you're having trouble getting started, then take some time reflecting on this basic prompt I mentioned before, i.e. what are the 3 components in a typical dramatic conflict? I antagonist plus desire. Roman 2 protagonist/opposing force, and Roman 3 obstacle between those 2 parties that must overcome. And what are the main things driving each part? I, what do we fear from each person? And Roman 2, what goal do they each seek to achieve? E, where/how did their desires overlap in one another's paths? Asterisk, this may come later for many people who will have some clarity about those issues, but the more prepared you can be for those questions, the easier it should become to focus your thinking/fleshing out of scenes. Once you see where all these individual events line up and connect into one continuous trajectory, then all you'd have left really would just be crafting each component piece separately, and the scene's setup will flow organically without much effort. And it can work both ways here, once an outline begins getting created in your head. Asterisk, so basically there might even come a point, as with anything related, wherein we reach these critical junctures and find our focus changing rapidly depending upon how we react or whether we notice what needs noticing. In other words, that moment where you suddenly notice / see something you didn't think about before, then boom, boom. That instantaneous shift happens and everything changes all at once, where you just see how those initial thoughts evolved naturally through different perceptions throughout every single step of development toward a new ending, not always linear either. And all along you continue being amazed and intrigued. At least that's usually how my storylines evolved / transitioned. By new developments / turns of events in which I find myself discovering new ways to approach each issue. Or it could happen completely differently. For instance, you find yourself wanting desperately one thing only to discover you never desired / craved another option before, now that suddenly became available, or maybe not even something so directly personal, simply realizing there might truly be other paths we don't consider / imagine for ourselves until.
Lame. There we go. Can I get some? There we go. There's a lot of special, I'm trying to get the special character. There we go. Like Scorsese. These guys are Scorsese.
I call it the Kieser Soze moment. That moment when things are happening in reverse from where everyone expected / wanted / planned. And you watch your own plans collapse into one another. It's so easy to see what worked and why, but what might we have missed while writing our stories? Is there anything missing at all, really? Because that too is a very good clue. That feeling which keeps happening throughout this entire exercise is what truly defines whether things work in our narratives versus being simply coincidental happenstances that happen at random times and places. Or what if everything happened at once all along from beginning to end without any deviation whatsoever, and we didn't even notice? Or when you can sense where someone would stop reading and move on to something different altogether, instead they stayed focused and kept reading. It tells you so much more. There are reasons beyond why certain scenes keep pulling you in / out, and how / why they impact, how / if readers feel interested or engaged. And this is the difference in storytelling between the way a screenwriter develops material and where most folks fail miserably. You see, many writers just write their plots without thinking about anything except their individual moments / plot twists, without giving thought about how each part connects until it's too late to reevaluate what should remain unchanged. Because once there's any deviation, all bets are off for readers. And by then, what they may care most about won't seem as important / connected enough for our purposes. Or maybe something better could exist in between that might have helped us achieve our goal earlier if it only existed. And then the experience point dispensary. Now that all the necessary preparatory work was done and the user is now ready for a fully realized multi-sensory experience based on their written content, then they can now enjoy the real purpose of this entire apparatus with ease. And to that end, the frame component system itself will be the first major aspect of this experience. By inserting the required prismatic component frames into each scene, each individual user will be able to insert himself into each component within the story itself in real time from behind the chosen prismatic lens. So to speak as though it were their own unique perspective, memory, or worldview that guided them through these particular story events / experiences, all within the boundaries of this frame. This means that rather than an objective third-person observer viewing every aspect of these experiences from a neutral standpoint, rather they enter a unique frame of mind specific to each character that will color and shape their experiences within those story elements. Thus, they may not necessarily see or think the exact same things or react or respond the way they would personally if it had been their own life being put under this microscope by means of a prismatic component lens, rather than becoming a passive observer merely watching everything unfold from outside like an outsider looking in. Each individual user becomes a key participant with an active presence that helps drives this overall narrative forward. But because each person sees every moment / scenario through his or her own individual window through which he perceives it while writing and reading, and that no two frames within this context share identical perspectives or experiences, from that perspective each person may feel quite sure he experiences things just slightly differently, even if both shared nearly identical frames. The process ensures a very rich multisensory environment filled with various details, whether sensory details or otherwise, and one wherein we can begin asking meaningful questions about who we are as individuals apart from each other. And last, to enhance this already very rich and vivid overall experiential framework even further, each character should be able to reflect upon his experiences through these scenes using an inner monologue or personal journal, for example, that helps reveal insightful thoughts and reflections about what he observes both internally and externally, which may provide a degree of self-awareness regarding interactions with other people. These reflective prompts some important insights for both those involved, because this not only does it provide additional opportunities to ask probing questions such as was their interpretation accurate for any situation, any biases distorted what happened from beginning to end, might explain about one's thoughts or perceptions during an experience they do when interacting with one another. We can see clearly using these our reaction exercises others' perceptions and reactions as well. Framework component system itself. The user of these materials may gain much needed understanding and insights to explore further within himself, and therefore develop more mature ways to respond accordingly. And with these types of questions posed within ourselves and across these frames, not only should one start developing insights into himself, but it also helps us make decisions about our actions. And now you are ready to begin the scenario. Tony and Tina's wedding, civil ceremony. Tina, standing at the back of the church, her face covered by an elaborate veil attached to a pearl and her headpiece, looks towards the back of the church to see everyone has finally arrived. It's about an hour or so after they all showed up at St. Luke's Cathedral, where they held mass this morning, then headed here at around 5 o'clock before she came inside again from outside the vestibule, and they were going to start soon. But there'd already been 3 cancellations so far. First, Tony hadn't heard anything from anyone yet, and there was no reply yet either, at least an hour or so now that she checked on his mother, Rosemary, or at any rate her friends, and also none so far too on whether anybody could come from work. This isn't supposed to go like this, she thought, with my life on the line, my husband dying. They don't get that, but then who would? It isn't right. Not with my best man missing. I think about it as though there might have been something different I could have done. Or maybe I'm just angry because Tony won't let me leave the house yet until this wedding is over. He needs time, and so he doesn't want the wedding cancelled either if his family does. So what can we do? He says, well, that's what happens when someone like you isn't invited anymore. They start getting ideas that they aren't invited either. Maybe true, maybe not. It hurts still that it all has to go on like normal. Anyway, even if we did want to take them to court with no evidence left at all. I hate it, especially after having told Tony it might go differently with his cousin or any relatives being there to hear something from us about it, because of their loyalty in spite of how crazy everything has gone lately. He says, well, what should I say anyway to any family we had here? When does it start working for all that I think about them and all this pain? Why did I schedule the wedding on a Wednesday? Who does that? It makes everyone so nervous when I say we'll hold it later in the day, so people have less trouble coming to the reception afterwards without drinking during daylight hours. There goes that rule right off my own mouth when talking to one of our cousins. And why don't they invite themselves over too? I want everybody here. Why do we care? Because they don't love me enough. When it's only us here together at home like tonight, he looks up in wonder while thinking, how could someone else ever care enough if you are not in front of them? When he looks at me, you see something different when the whole world can't understand it. Tina whispered back softly as she turned her head aside. How long had she been like this since last week? Since they first started arguing in anger? What exactly does he see now in her eyes every night? Was it really something beyond everything anyone else saw in her before that made his eyes go wide and start smiling? Tina stood there next to him as he stared up toward heaven above through those big bright blue orbs that were staring back like there wasn't anything better left to do but laugh about. Except nothing did happen for them that way tonight yet anyway. It felt weird having just sat on her bed watching all afternoon until Tony wanted her to go out there. But he had said yes, that he liked seeing her do more lately after so long. That was all it took to make up her mind, really. Just a single word. Just knowing his answer meant he was looking forward to the wedding even though he hadn't been sure for weeks now. Now they were both getting dressed separately. Tennessing's not getting married today from company. YouTube.com/watch V=XNJ1D59R6 cup. The scene unfolds as they finish preparing and gather with family outside to proceed to the church. This song is sung as Tony begins dressing in his tuxedo before being let outside. When it transitions, the groom and bride enter a car that takes off toward the church, accompanied by the wedding part. Well, I ain't getting married today. As he is being driven toward the church, I don't care what mother tells me. While holding his hand, before following his mom and some other relatives inside. At first, she doesn't hear anything that makes sense to her, but eventually understands. What happens here will shape their future as spouses. So, why should he want things like normal after everything had gone sour for so many years now between them? Tony, who had grown nervous as well since leaving the house to return for the big event, looked up as he sat there in front of Tina during another moment. What happened with him today?
Right. Hold on. I'm not getting monetized whatsoever. I never do. I'm just gonna add poster open because I want that quality of there we go. Not getting any money. No money. No money. No money.
Listen, everybody. Look, I don't know what you're waiting for a wedding. What's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, which is maybe the most horrifying word I ever heard of, which is followed by a honeymoon where suddenly he'll realize he's settled with a nut and want to kill me, which he should. Thanks a bunch, but I'm not getting married. Go have lunch, cause I'm not getting married. You've been grand, but I'm not getting married. Don't just stand there. I'm not getting married, and don't tell Paul. But I'm not getting married today. Go. Can't you go? Why is nobody listening? Goodbye. Go and cry at another person's wake. If you're quick for a kick, you could pick up a christening, but please, on my knees, there's a human life at stake. Listen, everybody. I'm afraid you didn't hear her. Do you want to see a crazy lady fall apart in front of you? It isn't only Paul who would be ruining his life. You know, we'll both of us be losing our identities. I telephoned my analyst about it, and he said to see him Monday, but by Monday I'll be floating in the Hudson with the other garbage. I'm not well, so I'm not getting married. You've been swell. But I'm not getting married. Clear the hall, 'cause I'm not getting married. Thank you all, but I'm not getting married. And don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today. Hey, Tony. Hey, Tina, listen. We really think you've made a serious mistake here, and we want you both to know how sorry we are. We know we let you both. We just thought it was better this way. Don't think like that. It'll never work. No. We're not having anything to do with this. No. Don't worry about it. They can get over it. They have to. There's nothing to get mad at anymore. We won't hurt anybody.
I took away all the comics. So, going it all randomly. There we go.
Listen, everybody, look, I don't know what you're waiting for a wedding. What's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, which is maybe the most horrifying word I ever heard of, which is followed by a honeymoon where suddenly he'll realize he's settled with a nut and want to kill me, which he should thanks a bunch, but I'm not getting married. Go have lunch, 'cause I'm not getting married. You've been grand, but I'm...
Let's take this all to, there we go. That should be enough.
Listen, everybody, look, I don't know what you're waiting for a wedding. What's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, which is maybe the most horrifying word I ever heard of, which is followed by a honeymoon where suddenly he'll realize he's settled with a nut and want to kill me, which he should thanks a bunch, but I'm not getting married. Go have lunch, 'cause I'm not getting married. You've been grand, but I'm not getting married. Don't just stand there. I'm not getting married, and don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today. Go, can you go? Wise nobody listening. Goodbye. Go and cry at another person's wake. If you're quick for a kick, you could pick up a christening, but please, on my knees, there's a human life at stake. Listen, everybody, I'm afraid you didn't hear. Or do you want to see a crazy lady fall apart in front of you? It isn't only Paul who would be ruining his life. You know, we'll both of us be losing our identities. I telephone my analyst to poo. Listen, everybody, look, I don't know what you're waiting for a wedding. What's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, which is maybe the most horrifying word I ever heard of, which is followed by a honeymoon where suddenly he'll realize he's settled with a nut and want to kill me, which he should thanks a bunch, but I'm not getting married. Go have lunch, 'cause I'm not getting married. You've been grand, but I'm not getting married. Don't just stand there. I'm not getting married, and don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today. Go, can you go? Wise nobody listening. Goodbye. Go and cry at another person's wake. If you're quick for a kick, you could pick up a christening, but please, on my knees, there's a human life at stake. Listen, everybody, I'm afraid you didn't hear. Or do you want to see a crazy lady fall apart in front of you? It isn't only Paul who would be ruining his life. You know, we'll both of us be losing our identities. I telephone my analyst to boo. Tietney said to see him Monday, but by Monday I'll be floating in the Hudson with the other garbage. I'm not well, so I'm not getting married. You've been swell, but I'm not getting married. Clear the hall, cause I'm not getting married. Thank you all, but I'm not getting married. And don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today.
Okay. There has to be a sweet spot that gets all of those bits. Let's see how this goes. Let's kick it up.
Listen, everybody, look, I don't know what you're waiting for a wedding. What's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, which is maybe the most horrifying word I ever heard of, which is followed by a honeymoon where suddenly he'll realize he settled with a nut and want to kill me, which he should thanks a bunch, but I'm not getting married. Go have lunch, because I'm not getting married. You've been grand, but I'm not getting married. Don't just stand there. I'm not getting married. And don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today. Go, can't you go? Why is nobody listening? Goodbye, go and cry at another person's wake. If you're quick for a kick, you could pick up a christening, but please, on my knees, there's a human life at stake. Listen, everybody, I'm afraid you didn't hear. Or do you want to see a crazy lady fall apart in front of you? It isn't only Paul who would be ruining his life. You know, will both of us be losing our identities? I telephone my analyst to boo. Tietney said to see him Monday, but by Monday I'll be floating in the Hudson with the other garbage. I'm not well, so I'm not getting married. You've been swell, but I'm not getting married. Clear the hall, cause I'm not getting married. Thank you all, but I'm not getting married. And don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today.
Try. Let's see what the very. Or two.
Listen, everybody, look, I don't know what you're waiting for a wedding. What's a wedding? It's a prehistoric ritual where everybody promises fidelity forever, which is maybe the most horrifying word I ever heard of, which is followed by a honeymoon where suddenly he'll realize he settled with a nut and want to kill me, which he should thanks a bunch, but I'm not getting married. Go have lunch, because I'm not getting married. You've been grand, but I'm not getting married. Don't just stand there. I'm not getting married. And don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today. Go, can you go? Why is nobody listening? Goodbye, go and cry at another person's wake. If you quit for a kick, you could pick up a christening, but please, on my knees, there's a human life at stake. Listen, everybody, I'm afraid you didn't hear. Or do you want to see a crazy lady fall apart in front of you? It isn't only Paul who would be ruining his life. You know, we'll both of us be losing our identities. I telephone my analyst to boo. Tietney said to see him Monday, but by Monday I'll be floating in the Hudson with the other garbage. I'm not well, so I'm not getting married. You've been swell, but I'm not getting married. Clear the hall, cause I'm not getting married. Thank you all, but I'm not getting married. Don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today.
All right, that's it for now.